So Jeffrey Dell, how are you doing at this strange time in
I
history?
am doing very well. It is a strange time.
Are you there in your studio or in your office or?
I am currently in my office. I would have done this from my studio, except I have uh, I have a few students that I am allowing into the building for them to pick up their supplies and clean out their flat files today, and I've
Yeah.
staggered them through the day, and so I have this window of time between
Yeah.
appointments to
Okay.
let them in. So
Yeah.
you're getting my storage room view of the classroom, which
That
is
that
now sitting here gathering dust.
that top shelf looks a little sketchy there.
Yeah, it's probably going to fall on top
Yeah.
of me. It gets worse. Check it out.
I know that you have an interest in speculative fiction in some form. I know you've gotten a lot of inspiration from sci-fi visuals.
Yes.
What does printmaking look like in the year 2040?
Hmm.
I mean, not
Uh,
really. That's not really the question. Can you speculate a little bit on what printmaking looks like going forward in a pandemic over the next few years? And sure, 2040, what does printmaking look like? Just,
okay.
yeah.
I'll treat those two as kind of one and the same. On the one hand, the same human desires, needs, and impulses that gave rise to printmaking to begin with, I think are the reasons that we as humans came up with the internet.
Hmm.
And in that sense, I think the internet is just another form of printmaking in that sense. On the other hand, I think that the draw to printmaking, the appeal, is very much as a hands-on thing. And so and it's an analog thing. And so I think the digital tools are here to stay and super powerful and very wonderful. But I think that people are going to continue to want to merge it. Um, my guess is, and it has got me to think about this in the last month and a half, 2 months, with the pandemic, is I don't want to, like I said a few moments ago, I don't want to do bad printmaking at home.
Hmm.
But I do think that this will have us turn more towards printmaking that does not rely on really intense equipment.
Hmm.
I think that there will always be a role for the well-equipped shop, but I do think that like if I'm going to be teaching printmaking remotely again in the fall, because that is a possibility, then I am going to start doing demos online that will be, say, multi-block relief, and but I didn't want to, in the middle of this pandemic, I didn't want to tell students like, oh well, here's $100 worth of stuff that I need you to buy now,
Right.
after having bought all this other stuff that we're not going to use now.
Right.
So
Right.
I didn't feel comfortable doing that. But if I can plan ahead, and that is the material list that I'm going to have them buy, then we can do some of that. And so I would I absolutely would turn to, go back to the analog and the hands-on. And I think that will always stay. I mean, I think we see that, everybody said, well, electronic books are going to kill books. And they killed a sort of segment of books, but they didn't kill books.
Right.
In fact, if anything, it actually raised an interest in books as objects.
Right.
And I think the same thing, I mean, look at letterpress, and the rise of letterpress in the last 15, 20 years. And now even like small to mid-sized cities across the country have these businesses that are letterpress where people go and get all sorts of stuff printed, and people are still going to want that. They're going to want that, to one degree or another. And so I think printmaking can sort of fit in these niches along this whole spectrum, from what we think of as visual art to what we think of uh, as exclusively commercial or exclusively design. And there's a lot of blur in all that, even though there are also distinctions. So I think that the analog will continue to tether us, although I think that coexisting with that will be this online activity, which will continue to grow.
Mm.
I had printmakers. I was doing a conference earlier today with an advanced student who started doing a series of digital images, and now it's turned into a video animation where she's trying to replicate what we see under our eyelids when we stare at the sun. So if our eyes are closed and we're looking towards the sun, we get these crazy color visuals.
Yeah.
And so she's trying to do that. And there's a number of people that have thought about that, but she's doing such a fantastic job of executing it and coming up with these correlates within the animation. So it's not an exact replica of what we might see, but it is a really successful correlate. Well, that's an example of something she never would have come to if she were making intaglio prints in the shop. And so that's an example of what I mean. Like, there will be this stuff that is conceived and built to exist online. More and more of that. Now, in terms of like how we navigate money is connected to that, I think as artists is a different problem. I don't have an answer to that. And I'm not sure I'm the best mind to come up with an answer to that. So I think those two things are going to continue to be hand in hand. That on the one hand, there'll be this remove from the analog, but I think coexisting with that will be this analog. That will always be, because there will always be a ton of humans that just need that kind of analog. I don't think it's a foreign or surprising idea to artists who are used to working with their hands that the hand has its own kind of intelligence. And even the kind of unconscious, unseen dialogue that happens when you use your hands and engage your hands in certain ways, that has a feedback mechanism to the brain, which facilitates all sorts of thinking and insight. So, I mean, I would argue straight up that there is a psychological, not only benefit, but need for a kind of analog, and that it's absolutely part of a mentally and physically healthy life. Yeah. Teaching printmaking online certainly has its challenges. But I have a colleague who's teaching 3D design online and definitely struggling more than I am.
Yeah.
So I opted to, instead of, I saw a number of my colleagues across the country, across the world, coming up with various ways of printing at home.
Yeah.
And I think that can be helpful up to a point, but I opted, instead of trying to scramble and come up with ways of doing kind of mediocre printing at home, I opted instead for pulling back on the printing aspect but moving forward with all of the formal aspects of the class. And so some of that involved drawing, and then taking those drawings into digital imaging tools, but still like limiting things based on the same kinds of limitations you would have in a printing situation, in this very binary, like either the inks are going to transfer to the paper or they're not, and also where the paper is showing through the ink, or as you overlay, what's underneath is showing through. So we focused on some of that. And then I'm finishing up my print one, where I always do an ukiyo based project, because I believe so strongly in the value of copying really good other art. And normally we do that as a actual multi-block color relief print, but I had them do it via collage, and we'll find out tomorrow how that went. But in that sense, I took a cue from when I used to teach study abroad in Italy, and one of the projects I would have them do in that, because when I was doing it, we didn't have a studio, and so we were kind of roaming. We weren't quarantining, but we were roaming, and we didn't have facilities, and the students were working in the apartments they were staying in and didn't really have studios proper. So in answer to that situation, I would have them do these little tiny collages, no bigger than 5 by 7, but even smaller. And in the case of Italy, I would have them do the collages exclusively out of material found freely on the street. So it could be posters ripped off walls or a lot of garbage. And frankly, you just don't have as much interesting garbage sitting around in San Marcos, Texas, as you do in Florence. And so, and plus the garbage isn't really sanitary. And in a pandemic, I wasn't sure I wanted people to do that.
Yeah.
So we didn't do garbage, but I did give them a lecture showing a bunch of those collages and then trying to get them to think outside the box about what you can use for collage, and trying to avoid exclusively using fashion magazines or something like that.
Yeah. Wow, those are some great strategies. I was in a similar situation, and I basically, I didn't really know how to direct my class. I have them doing collage with existing prints, just, tearing up their whatever proofs they were able to do before we broke for the semester, and a lot of handwork on proofs as well. And I'll see in a day or two how the results are.
One thing I would love to encourage you is something I did with we have an Instagram account that's specific to our student organization for print. And I started soliciting through that account examples of print in the wild. So found moments of something that could vaguely, one way or another, kind of be seen as print, but in a very sort of conceptual vein, like traces of something now absent. So sometimes it's quite literal, like maybe a footprint, or there's one where there was a lizard stuck in some kind of caulking sealant between pads of concrete or something. So there's some obvious examples, but there's also some really kind of charming examples. And so that was another strategy I used for thinking more broadly about what had to happen. And then in the advanced, I was nervous about this, but I kind of shifted gears there, and I introduced this project where they had to invent a kind of printmaking, but the focus was not on the technical and the chemical or anything like that. The focus was definitely on conceptual and poetic. And honestly, the advanced class responded super well to that. And I think not only were there some great projects, but some people ended up kind of pursuing some ideas that they never would have come to without this given situation, and which I think some of those people are going to continue in that vein. Very much. And that was certainly heartening to see that. And but almost as a whole, my advanced class responded super well to that.
Great. That's cool to hear. And what does next semester look like at this point? I know it's anyone's guess, but it sounds like Texas is sort of opening back up for business, quote unquote.
Well, that's the ethos of our state, I think, regardless of what, individuals feel about that. I mean, so my university is saying that they will resume on-campus activities during summer 2, which is essentially the month of July. And of course that could change. And that would also mean that fall semester will also be on campus. I mean, I think they're saying that now because they're worried about people making decisions now. And they're worried if they say outright, I think they're worried, even if they say, well, we don't know, we're going to wait and see. People will make decisions now about next fall. And so they're trying to establish things now so that people make decisions to enroll. I mean, my university, like every university across the country, is facing a tremendous budget crunch. I think I would not be surprised to see, I mean, we're already on a hiring freeze. I would not be surprised to see furloughs and possibly even pay cuts at some point in the coming year. So we'll just have to wait and see. You know, I don't know. I mean, in 2008, enrollment went up because people couldn't get jobs.
Right.
I don't think it's at all clear that's what will happen now. There's just so much we don't know about how things will go.
Yeah.
I think all we can do is sort of take it one day at a time. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. Interesting.